Hey Guitar Champion, what's going on? I'm Justin Hornbach back from my practice cave and welcome to today's video. Another interview for the format that I call the League of Extraordinary Educators, where I'm inviting your favorite YouTube educators and YouTube guitar players to talk about practicing guitar, practice habits, playing live, nerding out about music and much more. Today we have the legendary Jack Gardiner here on this show. These videos are perfect for your warm-up session because afterwards you're definitely more inspired on what you can practice and what you should practice. So get yourself a coffee, your guitar, get your fingers warmed up and pumped up, and let's roll the intro and start the interview with Jack Gardiner. Here we go. So, welcome Jack, welcome to the show. Really glad to have you here on this little YouTube format. I hope you're doing well.
Oh man, thank you so much for having me just now. I'm a massive fan of your channel and what you do. I was literally watching this morning the interview with Raphael, who's a monster player, by the way. And all you guys, man, like, you need to teach me the picking ways. I have no idea what's going on there.
You can teach us a lot as well. And this is something where we talk about today. About practicing, about teaching, about social media stuff, a lot of really interesting insights from you, Jack Gardiner. And I want to start with my regular question. Do you have practice today? If yes, what did you have practice? And if not, what is currently on your practice routine and on your practice schedule? If there's
I would
something
say
like that.
not really practiced. I've played over 2 tracks in preparation for, we've got a gig actually. It's around the NAMM show with a guy, Hedras Ramos, who's a great player.
Great.
And Daniele Guittardo from Italy. Basically, the idea of the gig is like we each do our own set, and then at the end there's going to be a jam. But they've chosen some pretty, I wouldn't say hardcore fusion, but like it's more changes than I would love to play over, shall we say, you know. So I've just been checking out Protos Cosmos, is it, by Alan Holdsworth. So nice. just having a quick run through and figuring out what the changes are. But not really focused practice at the moment. It was just a case of, let's stick on the backing tracks and see if I can actually navigate this without sounding like a complete idiot.
Is it on the Saturday in NAMM, your show?
Yes. Yeah. Are you going to be there?
I'm going to be at NAMM the first time ever.
Oh, no, you don't want to see it. Come to the gig, but just, like, go outside when I play, if that's cool, you know?
So, you are one of the OG YouTubers, in my opinion. I've watching your stuff since, I don't know, 12, 13 years, where you've mostly covered a lot of stuff, but also doing the first Guitar Idol auditions and all this kind of stuff. So what would you say, in retrospective, what have changed in your practice routine when you're remembering back in the day till today? And maybe are there certain routines and habits that stays the same, where you say you practice the same like 12, 13 years ago? And what did change for you?
I would start off by saying I am a terrible student when it comes to practice. I never could do the whole thing of here's like a routine, 10 minutes I'm going to work on this, or an hour I'm going to work on this. I remember listening to a podcast from my old teacher, actually, Tom, where he was talking about this kind of subject. And like, I think there's 2 mindsets always with these kind of practice ideas, whereby for a lot of people it works where they can have that structure. Whereas for me, and I think Tom was the same, is it's more like I become obsessed with one area, whether that's like, blues phrasing, or whether that's legato technique, or whatever it is, where I can only hyper focus on that and only do that for hours and hours and hours. And there's not necessarily a structure. It's more a case of how can I get to the point where this feels like it's part of my playing now? It's a tool that I can use, whether that's in improvisation or composition or wherever, where it's more like that obsession, like a video game, like say a Dark Souls video game. I love that series where, yes, I love the Tatsa, where, like you do it over and over and over and over again until you feel like, right, I've learned the moveset now. It's not like you go in and you're like, I'm going to practice the block for this for 10 minutes and then I'm going to do, it's just obsession, you know?
That's a really interesting point, because I now realized for myself who's somebody who's really structured and planned out. And I realized for myself, okay, this kind of structure, it gives me some sort of security, because then I know, okay, I've done something for today. If I don't have this kind of structure in general in my life, I'm starting to procrastinating as hell. So I need my plan. But I realized one thing that is missing a lot when you have this big kind of structure is some sort of obsession and focus on one particular thing, because it's really easy to switch between certain techniques, like you've already mentioned, doing this technique for half a minute, doing this technique for another half a minute, half an hour, doing this technique for another 30 minutes, and so on. So sometimes I try to mix it up with this kind of obsession, trying to learn one solo, really digging deep into it, really getting it so much under my finger that you won't realize if it's me playing or the recording and all this kind of stuff. So in your use, would you do this more with exercises or more really with, okay, here's that solo, I want to really learn that solo? Or
I think in the very early days, it was like obsession with replicating. So I think like the oldest YouTube videos I've got on there,
Scarified by Ray.
Oh yes, I
just watched it today.
I can't believe you remember that one. That's taken me back. But like Paul Gilbert or Ingve, he was a huge one for me. Steve Vai was the main one. I think in the like when I was 10 to maybe 14, and then YouTube came about. And that's when I discovered like the Tom Quayles, the Martin Millers, Guthrie Govan, and Marco Sfogli. I can't ever pronounce his name. Italians always berate me for that. But his song, I think it was Still Hurts, was like maybe the first song I'd learned from start to finish. Just desperate to copy like the phrasing or like the vibrato, things like that. And then I think like with technique, I was always terrible with exercise. It's probably why I can't pick, because I didn't have the discipline to just sit there. If I couldn't do it after, like an hour, then I'd get bored of it and move on. Whereas the legato stuff felt more natural under the fingers. So like I could attempt. It would never be as clean as those guys, but at least I felt like I could attempt it in some way. But then I'd say though, that getting to like, 18, 19, going to university, things like that. I had like a teacher there that was like more straight ahead jazz guy. And he was giving me like, exercises through changes and things like this. And I sucked at them like really badly. That I came back to, I think, as I got a little bit older and was like, right, okay, now is the time to really focus on this. Like, and I think a lot of it is to do with like, I call it embracing the suck, in the sense that you're never supposed to sound good at something that you're practicing, are you? You're supposed to sound bad. It's something you've never done before. And for me, it was always a case of, could I get something that sounded okay? And if I could, then I was done. It was like, right, this is there. Now, as I'm getting older, and now the practice time, having like 2 kids and stuff is more limited.
Oh, 2 kids already? Nice.
What's a yes? There's 2
nice.
now. Chaos, absolute chaos. But I'd say like now I do say to myself, right, there's a goal, and say that's playing over a song like this Protos Cosmos today. It's like, okay, you have 2 hours free, and 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. The focus is to be able to nail these changes by the end of it. Hopefully, it's like. That is where the structure is more, I would say. And during COVID, I would say that like guys like yourself and a few others like Stephen Taranto, I was watching a lot of that to see like, can I finally get the right hand into some kind of form, Nowhere near where I'd love it to be, but it's like that has had more structure where it's like every day, even if it's only 30 minutes, can you do some kind of work to see if that's working? I know you've mentioned it on the podcast before with a few of the other players, and I think like video on yourself is super important in all of this too. I think YouTube for me over the years has been like the perfect like snapshots of like, okay, this is what you are really bad at. Go and work on that, you know?
Definitely. I mean, this is something where I recommend for everybody also to try out social media, because it can be a lot of fun, We can be a lot of trouble as well. We're going to talk this about later. But yeah, it's a snapshot of your playing right now, and it will never change. And you have to accept it as a certain point. There are videos out there from me where I'm taking a look right now, which aren't that long ago, like a few months ago, where I was thinking like, oh man, I played like shit here. I would do something differently here now and then. But you have to accept it, you have to embrace it, and then you have to know, okay, I can work on this, I can always get better, Most of the stuff that we are currently practicing is based on our work, on whether we have to do something for social media or for some online courses or from some gigs or whatnot. Do you still have sometimes the time where you think like, okay, I want to learn this solo that I always loved, or I want to check out this kind of song just for myself, sitting down, had nothing to do with social media or with getting it out there, but just for myself? Do you sometimes have these kind of feelings and moments, or is it something where you would say, okay, that's kind of really precious for us to still have these kind of childish feeling back like when we were 13, 14 years old?
Oh, for sure, man. Yeah, I think like you've got to make time for that, and I've slowly realized that. I think since having the second child, I'd spend lots of nights like up with him, essentially, like feeding him in the living room. But as opposed to the first child I had, like with the first child, I was quite lazy. I was playing PlayStation instead. It would be like that was the fun.
That's also
moment.
Totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got to have the fun. But this time I was like, right, I'm going to sit with the guitar, actually. It's not disturbing him. Let's just watch a few videos on YouTube on the TV. And it brought me back to like players like Gambale, who is still like one of the huge influences for me, Andy Timmons, Eric Gales, the blues guy. But also Neural came in around the same time and was saying, look, we've had an idea. Could you do like some cover tunes, but like make them your own, but as over the top as can be, as many notes as possible, the more notes the better.
Okay.
And so that got me revisiting, like songs which I'd loved as a kid, one of them being Another Day by Dream Theater. And I had to like go back and relearn, the Petrucci solo, and that is like, that's the fun. Yeah. I think, and you can learn so much as well. Like when I probably first learned that solo was back in the college days for a performance that we'd done with a band. And I remember the mindset was totally different. Like I had no idea how to analyze what he was playing or what his note choice was. Now you go back and you're like, wow, that is super interesting that he's playing X over Y, And I'd say like it seeps into the playing, every little lick that you transcribe. I wouldn't say I'm any good at doing full solos or full songs. I'm terrible. I don't have the attention span for that. But like just one lick or idea from a Gambale thing can open up so many doors for your own playing where you go, I can't do that sweep that he's doing there, but that's given me an idea of something in fourths that I can do that does feel natural for my right hand. It's weird little things that I'd say it's a massive part of growing as a player, and it's just absorbing language,
Yeah. Or the adapting all this kind of different licks and creating that melting pot of different influences and different players that creates in the end your own voice and your own individual kind of sound and style. Yeah.
Yes.
And therefore I always say like it's better when you have one lick getting out of a certain solo or one idea or lick getting out of a book or an online course or whatnot. I have so many books on music theory or on jazz and whatnot. And if I have one thing out of that book that helped me to grow as a musician, as a guitar player, then all the money was worth it,
Exactly, dude.
Yeah.
It just takes that one little concept sometimes, doesn't it, or lick, for you to find your own thing. Like, I think even there was a Steven Taranto line that I'd tried to transcribe. I mean, that guy, there is no way my right hand can play what he's doing at that speed. But it was just the grouping of notes that he played that I was like, I've never done that before.
Yeah.
And you apply that then to a technique that feels comfortable for you, and you're like, I can make so many different lines just with that sequence. Yeah.
So, I mean, you are also really known as an educator, especially when it comes to improvisation. What would you recommend? Where is, in your experience, a good way to start with improvisation? Where are some certain tripwires or some certain problems that a lot of starters had in the beginning?
I would say it's actually visually seeing the guitar is the biggest stumbling block, and it's still a block in the road that affects my playing, with certain scale sounds or certain arpeggio ideas, whatever it is. But it's choosing a foundational element of visualizing the fretboard that is the most important thing. You need to know note names for a start, regardless. That is the biggest thing. If you can't see note names on the fretboard, it's just a hindrance later on. I know I'm a proponent of it, and it was taught to me by Tom Quayle, the interval way of doing things. But you at least need to know where that root note is, and by that you need that note name. So I'd say doing that is probably the most fundamental thing, and then it's choosing, are you going to use the cage system, are you going to use 3 note per string, are you going to use the interval way, or is there a combination of those things? That's the fundamentals. It's realizing that it's not like a piano where those notes are all, the C is the C. There's no two ways about that. 6 different options for us. I think that's the big paralysis. But also it's like understanding that it's not a quick fix. Like anything that you learn with improvisation takes years before you can start to sound okay at it. I think a lot of the players that maybe want to get into it, especially from, the younger generation now, is maybe they're so used to like copying and learning, like someone else's material, or writing and composing their own stuff, which is great. But improvisation's a different ball game, and that is it. You're never going to be able to do that in 1 week, 2 weeks, and then post a video of you improvising and sounding, like a top level player or whatever. It's gonna take time. Obviously, there's different ways you can get there, and maybe there are shortcuts. I hate that word, but there are ways of visualizing, there's ways of practicing these things that will help you maybe quicker. But at the same time, don't neglect the fact that it can take you 15 years before you feel comfortable playing one scale type all over the fretboard, no matter what finger you start on, no matter what root note. It's just a time game, which I suppose social media doesn't allow for as much these days. But that would be, I say, the common pitfalls to avoid or to focus on and work on.
And it can also get away again, because I realized for myself I haven't improvised that much nowadays, like compared to my university time, where I was really into jazz and bebop and only had some big guitars, the big jazz guitar. And I realized, because sometimes I try to improvise a little bit more and try to get a little bit more confident again, that a lot of ideas and a lot of confidence is a little bit going away, because I focused more on technique. And this is something where I also realized, okay, I have to put on more time and more work and this kind of stuff to get this confidence back. But this is something which I always found really interesting in your playing, actually, because I think that in your playing you always see like, okay, this guy is really confident in what he's doing there, from what he's playing there, that he's confident about his technique, about his style, about the rhythm and all this kind of stuff. What would you say, what is kind of the key for you to get this kind of confidence in your playing? Or would you rather describe yourself as, what is he talking there? I'm not confident in my playing.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Like, I never feel like it's secure. I'd say, this is a funny one, but I always say this to any student who's getting into improvisation, is like, if your time feel is good and you're confident with that, that's half the battle. And I think, like, I'd always argue that note choice is secondary to that. And one thing which I think I got from my dad's a bass player, was my dad has no idea about theory or harmony or anything like that. I could turn around and say to him, play me a C major chord, and he's like, what is that? But we'll happily walk through something like Giant Steps by ear, and you're thinking like,
Oh, really?
how it, but it's all ear and time feel. He's just got like an innate, really strong sense of where that is. And I remember Tom Quayle saying that to me years ago. I always used to put like the perfect fourth over major 7 chords, like just because the fingers would end up there.
Yeah.
And he used to be like, Jack, you get away with murder. You don't know this fretboard, but your timing is so confident that you're getting away with it. And I think that's still a very like prevalent thing for me, is like, if I can convey to the listener strong sense of like subdivisions, or like, you know, like I'm really confident in how I attack a phrase or something like that, then I can get away with murder, shall we say. But inside, I never feel like super confident that this is going to work. This is going to be it. There are like moments, or like, you know, gigs or even takes when I'm doing like a video or whatever, where I feel like, oh, this is really fun. This feels easy. But I forget that it's probably years and years and years that I've played over that chord structure or that time feel, that it's just kind of like, okay, it's inside the body. Like, if I play 90% of the vocab that I already know and then go for a risk, or, you know, like try a risky line, then it should work, you know, kind of thing. But I'm never like 100% confident. I think inside I'm always thinking, oh, that's the same terrible line that I've played 100 times before, you know, like, when are you going to have a new idea, kind of thing.
Especially when those stupid cameras are on. I feel it's always so much of different pressure if you are in the moment in a live situation, even though when it's like for a clinic or something like that, which I always kind of feel extremely weird when there's no band where you can interact with or something like that. But with the cameras on, it's like you can easily say, okay, I'm doing another take, or another take, another take.
Yes.
And this totally, at some point, destroys the fun out of it, because then you're sitting here like 2 hours and still playing the same, and it gets worse and worse and worse, you know?
Oh, dude, that is the bane of having the option to go again, isn't it? You know, like, but I would say, though, clinics, I'm glad you've said that. They are my worst nightmare, I think, when it comes to improvisation. I love playing with a band. Like, that's like home. The second you're there by yourself, it's like something in the mind goes, oh, all eyes are on you at all times right now. You need to try and nail this.
And there are only guitar players sitting in that clinic.
Yeah, exactly.
And especially when it's like, we have this kind of big guitar summit, guitar fair kind of here in Germany nowadays. And I was invited to do some sort of clinic for a company. Yeah. And I thought like, oh, nobody's going to be interested in what I'm doing there. Nobody's going to be there. And then the room was completely full with a lot of really great and intense guitar players from Germany. I was sitting there like, fuck, I may have chosen some easier songs to play in this kind of situation.
Dude, especially with your stuff. I mean, oh my God, the right hand. Jesus, man. I had a similar experience in Italy, was it this year just gone, where it was me, Nick Johnston, Andy Timmins and Tom Quayle. And I remember they'd said to me, you're the first masterclass, and I was thinking, good, I can get it out the way until tomorrow, you know, when we start again. And I thought, hopefully none of the other guys will be awake, because it was so early. It was like, hopefully it's all chill. But I did like the sound check for the masterclass, played the song, all felt really good. And then I saw Tom Quayle and Nick Johnson walk in at the back of the room. First track, I remember like I was thinking, yeah, it's going to be fine. You know, as you're playing through it, and then the brain fart happened, and I just completely forgot the main melody of the song, had to improvise my way through it. And the first question from one of the guys there was, I saw you made a few slip-ups there. Like, can you give us like some tips on like how you get past that? You know, and you're like, oh my God, this has made me feel 10 times worse. That's the first question.
Oh God, terrible situation. But I mean, we can only grow with these kind of situations, and therefore we have to embrace it. And I mean, I would say even players like Tom Quayle or Nick Johnson, they all were in this kind of situation someday in their career. So.
Oh yeah.
I tried to take it with a lot of humor in the end. Yeah.
That's it. You've just got to take it on the chin, isn't it? You know, it's like, oh man, things go wrong inevitably, always, don't they? You know.
I mean, I was lucky in this situation because I could make a lot of fun about certain things because I was demonstrating a pedal there, and there was a camera right on my foot and on the pedal. And my shoes, I call them the jazz shoes because they were dirty, they were broken, there were holes in there, and I could also easily make a lot of fun about my shoes because I did not expect that there was a camera right on my foot, and I realized, like, oh fuck, my shoes! Looking at the screen, like, oh, my shoes, they're pretty dirty and fucked up, you know.
That's brilliant.
Going back to the improvisation kind of side again, were there a few moments where I realized, okay, here I understood now this kind of thing, or I understood this kind of thing, whether these kind of situation, or does it all come more and more gradually with the time?
I think it's like a constant path, isn't it? You know, that's the cool thing with it. And you hit these plateaus all the time. Like, I feel like I'm stuck at one now, but, you know, like, it can be as little as, I remember the first lesson with Tom. I think we only had like maybe 5 or 6 lessons, but in the first one we were talking about chord types and just like associating scale sounds to that. And like, you know, before this, I'd been taught like kind of 3-note per string, kind of caged. And the teacher, you know, the way he taught me modes, for example, was, oh, it's just C major, you know, you go start from the D, and you're like, oh, God, here we go. But just something as simple as being like, okay, here's a chord type, and these are like the associated sounds with it. That was a huge thing for me. And like the interval way of like, what makes up a chord type? What makes up a scale type? What are the chord tones? Little things like that, you know, like, if you don't have a teacher, that can be hard to... I guess maybe it's a little bit easier now with there's so much information on the internet, but still, like, little things like that can really change your mindset about improv. As well, like, you know, the whole jazz thing of, like, playing arpeggios through changes and really locking in where the chord tones are. That was a big breakthrough moment for me. But yeah, I'd say they were the kind of big eye-opener moments. I mean, the other thing was the idea that, you know, pentatonics for me are still such a huge part of improvisation. I actually had a student, this is a funny story, this is last year or the year before. You know, he's a young guy, was playing like Intervals, you know, the band.
Aaron Marshall, yeah.
Huge fan of that, was blasting through that stuff. I thought, wow, this kid is a great player already. I don't know what I'm going to show him. And we get to improv, and I was like, well, let's just start super simple. I was like, let's just visualize the pentatonic. And I played it, and he was like trying to copy along, and I could see that he was like hitting all the wrong notes of like a box 1 minor pentatonic, and I was like, what's going on here? I was like, man, just A minor pentatonic. And he was like, I don't know that. And I was like, dude, what? How are you playing all of this other stuff? And he was like, I thought pentatonics are for boomers. And I remember being like, oh, okay, like, this is the new mindset. Okay. He said he'd heard it from some band or some player, and I was like, man, that band is definitely using pentatonics in their stuff. Like, I'm sorry to break it to you, but like, you know, this is a fundamental building block of improvisation here. And we spent the whole lesson just going over 5 positions of a minor pentatonic. And it made me think more and more like, yeah, that's such a fundamental thing of just being able to improvise within that limitation of 5 notes, but also to sound like musical with it. It's such a big task. But it's where all of that guitaristic phrasing comes from, you know, and it's such a heavy focus when I'm trying to teach improvisation. Is like, they are not just for boomers, man. Like, definitely understand that this is the fundamental part of phrasing, you know.
I always think it's like kind of weird when people are saying, okay, they don't use a certain approach or a certain technique because it has a stereotype on it, like pentatonics have been used in the 70s. Yeah, but fusion, you can do so much cool stuff. Look at Scott Henderson or so much cool stuff with pentatonic, and all these cool arpeggio, sweeping and whatnot with pentatonic. It's just crazy, and modern as well. And I always don't understand it. And this is sometimes which I miss for some younger generations players. I would say, yeah, the respect is maybe not the right word, but the to approach, or the respect for older music, or for the heritage of guitar playing, where it all comes from,
Yes.
where the roots of our music are. I always think it's really interesting to take a look at, okay, this guitar player was influenced by this guitar player and by this guitar player. What can I learn from all these different kind of guys,
Yeah, well, you see the DNA passed through the players, don't you? You know, like, I think Guthrie, for me, was one of the biggest inspirations as a kid, and still now, he's still one of the top. But you see a lot of his lines where he's taken from, I don't know, like even as simple as like a Hendrix idea that you can absorb, or maybe that's Scott Henderson. It's, you go back and you identify, like, oh, they're using these ideas and concepts. I'm convinced like Guthrie has got that from years of transcription. I think he was doing it for Guitar Techniques, was it, back in the day? And it's like, it's just an amalgamation. He is the ultimate like chameleon guitar player, I like to call it. It's just he can blend into wherever. But it's because he's followed those roots and gone back and gone, okay, who influenced him? Who gave that phrasing, or where did that vibrato come from? Or, and I think, like a lot of the younger ones, it's more a case of like, they have their favorite player, they want to copy that sound, and that's it. Like, whereas you can learn so much from.
You don't have to necessarily like the music. I mean, I'm not the biggest Jimi Hendrix fan when it comes to the music, but there's so much you can learn out of this playing, and you can see in today's neo-soul kind of stuff and all this kind of stuff. It's so much Jimi Hendrix based. So there's always something to learn and to experience, That's why not doing it?
Exactly. Even like, like some of the modern tapping stuff, I always go back to, what's his name? Stanley Jordan.
Yes, yeah.
He was doing all of that stuff in the 80s, and improvising with it as well, which is like another ball game completely, and it's like, while I might not like choose to listen to his music, like, you can get so much from that if you're wanting to do the modern stuff, these guys do, or like the thumping thing, the
Scott Michaud from the 90s and all these kind of guys. What's the French guy with the bald French guy? You made a really famous slapping, popping video in the early YouTube age era.
Oh, Christophe Godin.
Christophe Godin, yeah.
Monster player, like.
Now, that's a good point to go to the social media kind of stuff, because you made a big social media break a few years ago. And I would love to talk about this, because social media is nowadays such a big thing. And we all kind of earn our money, our bread and butter from social media. And we are so depending on it sometimes. What did especially change for you back in the day when you made that break? And how do you deal with these kind of problems today? Where's the difference from now? Because nowadays you are really active on social media and back in the day. And maybe let us remind you, why did you make that break back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of things. So when I got to 18, I think it was, like university, I got involved with playing live. That was the big thing for me. And so I was gigging covers gigs or like session gigs with like, older artists from the UK. It would be sometimes like 7 nights per week. And like I got into this mindset, which was wrong back then. But a lot of like the older session cats, or like, musicians who they call themselves like working musicians when they're doing those gigs, are like, oh, you're just a bedroom player. Like, like why are you bothering with doing those videos? Like, you need to be out there and on the road. And I kind of bought into that a little bit, like it was kind of like, oh yeah, all of these older dudes are like, they've done it, they've been on the road, they've learned this way, maybe that's the way to go. And back then, like you'd upload a video for fun. It was almost like there wasn't a company involved, and it didn't matter if your last video was 6 months ago. You know, like your audience would still maybe come back and, you know, like check out what you're doing. I could literally stick on a camera, potato quality of just improvising over something and be like, that's where I am now. There's the snapshot. And then as the years went by, I think like I was getting so much into the gigging. I had like a really tough like mental health, like almost like couldn't really do much. It was all anxiety, couldn't really like function, shall we say, normally. And that was like personal reasons, but social media was playing a little bit of a part in that, where I was seeing like everyone was having to post every few days, and you know, you're watching videos and you're like, oh man, you know, the playing now is just getting too much. I can't keep up. Like I don't have the time to do this kind of thing. And there's an enemy in there of like comparison, you know, where you go like, oh my god, look at this guy like improvising like this, or look at this guy with his technique there, or oh my god, the camera quality on this is insane. Like, where you start to think, what's the point? Like, I'm never gonna catch up now, you know, I've taken too much of a break. And then I'd say like that was actually healthy in some ways, because I was so away from it that I could just play wherever I wanted. You know, it was like whatever felt right at the time. It was fun. I could do. I wasn't having to deal with like, okay, on Friday you've got to get this video out, or oh, you need to do this demo video. And to be honest, I would say like it can be very inspiring, but when you see that there's just constant uploads, it can be demotivating. You know, like it's very much like, okay, I've had 10 people like this, but I spent an hour getting the video camera set up. I've spent, you know, an hour afterwards making sure that the mix was right on the backing track. And it kind of was a point where I was like, actually, I just want to play live. You know, like I want to have fun. Like, this is my bread and butter kind of thing now. And then after taking that time away, I think it was just before COVID, which was lucky, I'd started like uploading again, just as like a no schedule, whenever I had the time to do it. And then COVID hit, and obviously no gigs, no anything like that, you know, no being on the road. And I'd honestly say that was like the best thing that could have happened at that time, because it made me go, I actually enjoy putting up some of these videos. I actually enjoy like making my own tracks, you know, like backing tracks, then original music. And it was like a different mindset. I had like a healthy relationship at that point, where it was like, this is for fun. There's no kind of pressure, you know, like there's no comparisons of, oh, it's got to be of this quality. Everyone was in the same boat. Everyone was stuck at home. It was just like, let's go, you know? So I'd say now social media for me, like without it, it wouldn't be a job in the same way. Luckily, I've been able to like step away from like the session gigs or things like that a little bit. I can pick and choose which I want to do now, and it's thanks to social media. So it's like a blessing in that sense. And I think so long as you don't get like tied up into whatever the latest fashion is of guitar playing, or, you know, like wherever the trend is, it's such a useful tool, you know?
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of the danger sometimes, to get in this kind of trap, like, okay, doing something which is kind of trendy right now, and then seeing the result in the numbers, because the comparison, not only the playing is sometimes difficult from other guitar players, but also the numbers, just to see, okay, man, that guy, he put out that video and gets so many thousand views and clicks and whatnot. And I recently, or a few weeks ago, released just a stupid meme kind of video, and it totally blew out. It was way over my expectations. And then I thought, like, okay, fuck it. You know, you're trying so much to do some, I don't know, interesting stuff to inspire people, and then this kind of meme video, it gets blows away. You know?
Dude, it's the way it goes, isn't it? I never thought Baby Shark would be a video that people would want to listen to.
But that was really awesome. That was really funny and creative. I really loved it.
Man,
with your look in the beginning, like being totally annoyed of that song, and then okay, let's do a fusion song out of it.
Oh, thanks. It's weird though, isn't it? That like you can, as you say, you can put in so much work into like your own songs, your own like stuff that you want to play, and then that happens, and all of a sudden people go back and they go, "Oh, that's cool. I want to learn this," or "Oh, I didn't know you had your own songs." You know, and you're like, Baby Shark was the reason you found this, really.
I mean, this is the cool thing about social media. It can also be kind of really creative, that you can really put a lot of inspiring creativity inside of a certain video. Or sometimes it just, sometimes I'm just being under the shower and then it get like, oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to record that today. And
Yes.
throw away all of my plans that I had for an actual videos that I prepared for weeks now. And then it's like, oh no, that one idea, I'm going to do it today.
Yeah,
so it can be really spontaneously.
I love those shower moments, and that is where all the video ideas come from, isn't it? You know, you're just like, I remember with Baby Shark, it was my daughter had came in here and she was asking me to put Baby Shark on the thing, and I was like, maybe I'll try to teach her how to play it on the MIDI keyboard. And she was like having none of it. You know, she was not interested at all. But I put on like a drum groove in the background, just a loop. I remember like afterwards going for a meal and I was like, maybe I can mess with that. You know, like when I get home, I was like, there's no plan. And then that ends up being a stupid fusion thing. And you're thinking, where did that, you know, I wanted to maybe teach something serious, as you were saying, or like, you know, do a song where you're thinking this has meaning behind it to me in some way, you know. Like.
Then Baby Shark, yeah. So your social media output is also really important for your own platform where you teach. Let's talk a little bit about that in the end, about the way when people are seeing now this interview and they never heard of Jack Gardiner before, which is shame on you if you haven't heard about him before.
Don't be silly.
There's a way where they can learn to play like you. So what is the concept behind that platform, and what kind of material is it focused on or is on there?
Yes. So, I think this is Music Bro, right? With
Music Bro. Yeah, with Owain. Yeah.
So, the idea behind that really was, you know, a lot of people have been asking for Patreon or wherever, and like how to get into this kind of almost meme-y fusion, as I'm going to call it, because it's not like straight ahead fusion where, you know, it's tons of chord changes and lots of improvisation. I think both of us love that stuff, but this has like I mean, especially with the stuff which we write, it's more composed. It's not like a jazz-based, you know, thing. And I said to Owain, I was like, man, you're like the king of production. Why don't we do something together where it's like, okay, I'll handle the guitar stuff. Owain hates playing guitar, and I think I'm cool to say this on record. He just doesn't find it interesting, but he loves composition and loves production. So it was like this little melting pot where it was like, okay, I can teach my approach that I'm using with all the improvisation. It's basically all the lessons that are available on my website. It's that, except, you know, they can stream it. There's no tabs or things like this or backing tracks. They can stream them but not download. And then on Owain's side, he's looking more at production and, you know, like how maybe he's mixed some of our songs.
Oh, cool.
So it's really trying to get this kind of package together where you're like, okay, how could you do this alone? You know, if you're like a guitar player and you're thinking, I want to get into write my own songs, but I want to also know the approach of how to play over it. It's trying to combine those two elements in one place, really, you know. I mean, for me especially, like I've always sucked at production, and even I find myself like going onto Owain's videos, like even if it's like a programming bass lines, he always laughs at me, and I've found that through just watching a few of these that now I'm like in my own production, I'm noticing I'm using the same tricks or the same ideas. You know, production, I think, is very much like a hard thing to get into, especially for our styles of music. Like, it's very niche, isn't it? It's not electronic music in the same way, but it's borrowing elements from that, you know. You've got to be good at programming drums that sound kind of realistic, you know, like it's a different world now, I suppose, than back in the day when those guys would just find other musicians that were really good at their instrument, and then they'd get into a studio and do it that way, you know.
So what is more focused on your guitar kind of side? Is this more on improvisational focus or also on technique kind of side, or what is your kind of concept behind that?
There's a little bit of focus on technique. That's still in the pipeline for me to write more focus packages on, say, like the legato stuff or some of the sweep stuff. But it's mainly fretboard visualization, harmony and theory. There are some like lick masterclasses that I've taken from my site and put them on there. So they're looking at, you know, they are primarily technique based, I would say, but it's focusing in on more like one scale sound or one scale type. And then the improvisation, like that's two of my masterclasses from my own site that are on there. And the roadmap, I've called it, which is basically like what I would want if I was to go way back and focus in on where I found the biggest jumps in my own playing. It's really a lot about like visualizing those intervals, but in the form of limitation exercises, using devices like pentatonics to build up to full scale sounds. I think like Luke Lewis from, I don't know if you know him, from Guitar Vivo, he was saying to me like he coined the term pentatonic plus as a system, and that's kind of how I do it. I hate the word hexatonics. For me, that word just annoys me. I don't know why.
Okay.
And so, like, I think as well when people talk about hexatonics, for me, what I'm seeing is they're talking about triad pairs more than they are like, you know, like this 6-note scale thing. For me, I like to like limit myself in the sense that I go way back to a pentatonic, figure out all the intervals, work towards that full scale sound by adding in one at a time. You know, so this is kind of like what Improv Roadmap Part 1 is based on. It's understanding different scale sounds, different modal sounds as well, associating chord types with them. And then moving on to Improv Roadmap Part 2, that's where I'm incorporating, like, you know, how do I say it? Superimpose different arpeggio sounds, using things like melodic fragments, using things like triad pairs, you know, like not so much outside sounds and chromaticism yet. That's coming in part 3. But it's basically this. These are all the things which I think are like the core part of my own improvisation and how I kind of navigated that, you know, path.
That sounds awesome. I really have to check them out, especially the production side as well from Avani, because this is something where I suck as well really hard. And I have some projects coming on where I have to produce it by myself. So I'm definitely going to need that. So I'm going to definitely check it out. If you, the viewers, want to check it out, then check the link in the description box. There I'm going to post it for the Music Bros. Speaking of you and Avani, are there any plans in the future for upcoming gigs and shows? Because you toured last year. I saw you there in Cologne, which was really, really cool show together with Pliny and really a lot of fun, especially then knowing that for Ovani it was like the 5th show he ever had played. Like,
yes.
What? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, man, like Owain, it shocked me, you know, when we first met and he told me he'd never gigged. And he was so nervous about that talk, man. I had to convince him so hard to do it. Like, basically, like, for him, he's happy just producing at home, you know, like, that's his thing. He doesn't consider himself, like, a guitar player in that sense. That's more like, it's the main tool for him to achieve the sounds that he wants. But yeah, the tour, I think, was like a baptism of fire for him, maybe, because it was 30 gigs, pretty much back to back. I think we had 2 or 3 days off. And like, you know, it's not like the easiest gig to walk into, really, is it? You know, like, it's not like when you're playing for your mates. And
Yeah.
You
I mean, it was a sold-out show in Cologne in a big hall, you know, like, okay, that's not easy to step into at the first shows, yeah.
Man, I mean, this shows how, like, he'd never done it before. He'd do things like, he'd say to me, we'd get to some gigs and he'd be like, have you got a jack cable? And I'd be like, bro, what? And he'd be like, oh, can I use your tuner? And I'd be like, dude, what kind of thing? Like, I remember in the rehearsals, I snapped at him because he was using the Axe-Fx 2 and he had one patch and he was going over manually to change the reverb on or off or to tune. And I said to him, I was like, dude, have you not got like a MIDI foot switch, or have you not got like a tuner pedal, And he was like, no, I'll just go over and click it. And I was like, dude, you have no idea whether some of these venues you're going to even have access to that Axe-Fx 2. I was like, you need to get something on the floor. And he's like, why, man? He's always that like attitude of just like, it's a major inconvenience. It's like, I don't want to have another thing that I have to remember, it's already enough for the song. But yeah, I mean, I think like we did a few after that. We did Radar Festival in the UK, which was a disaster. Ooh. And then we did Japan. Oh, just like gear and prep and stuff like that. Converters were the big issue, shall we say. I was the only one who brought converters with me, and I think the guys had forgotten that the UK is a different...
I mean, you have the experience in it, coming from the UK, but it's something that you easily can miss,
I'd warned them, even the night before, I'd said, have you guys got converters? And that didn't seem to sink in, shall we say. But we did Japan, which was like... such a good experience, man. Like, those guys over there, the organization, and they have like a team of 5 working on just house engineers that everything you ask of them, like, they're more than happy to help with, and they're super nice dudes. We did that one, and I think Owain was thinking that was the last time he wanted to play live. He wants to just do production in the future. But I think that gave him the bug again, where he's kind of like, oh, if every gig was as cool as this, then maybe it's okay, Yeah. It's like... So, I mean, I think the plan is maybe we'll do another joint, like, EP, but as well, I'm planning on doing, like, a solo album this year. Nice. I'm actually in the process of, like, writing it now, and I'm thinking of getting, like, some... human musicians on rather than just the VSTs on this one, just to kind of have like something else to play. And then if Owain doesn't want to play live, there's the opportunity that we can still do these gigs that we get offered, just under my name kind of thing. If he's not comfortable necessarily going out, then
Because I mean, in the end, touring can be extremely exhausting, extremely stressful, but it's so much fun. It's always such a great experience, even though when you're just in a nightliner where everybody is sick and everything is small and tiny. But I don't know. It's after a tour, it's like, okay, I want to do it again.
Yeah, dude. I mean, there was 19 guys and 1 lady on our bus.
Yeah,
like for 30 days. That is intense.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't change it, You're like, I would happily do another one of them in the future, like get into the right mental state for it and off we go.
Yeah. Nice. So much about that, Jack. I really appreciate it that you were coming to this YouTube show, to the YouTube channel here. Thank you very much. It was a lot of great insight and great information from you. And
oh man.
Yeah, again, to the viewers out there, check out Jack Gardiner, check out his Instagram, his YouTube channel is really interesting. Facebook, if this is kind of still a thing and alive for some people. I don't know, not for me anymore.
I think once a week, check it,
Yeah. Anywhere else where you spread your knowledge? I don't know, Twitter, X, YouPorn, I don't know.
yeah, exactly. No, I just want to say a massive thanks for having me, Justin. Like I say, man, I'm a massive fan of what you're doing. I think a lot of people have a lot that they could learn from this, myself included. I need some lessons on Pixar, and I still don't even know what that is, but I'm like, this way or this way. But man, honestly, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on, dude.
Awesome. So much. See you on the next video. You subscribe, follow, and like, the usual stuff that you always say to the end. Cheers and stay progress. Bye.
Cheers.